There are two ways that I'm going to show you today to find the greatest common factor. The first method we're going to use to find our greatest common factor is making a list. Okay, we're going to start by listing all the factors we have of these two numbers. Okay, sometimes you'll see this called the rainbow method, and I'll show you why it's called the rainbow method in just a second. But when we look at these factors, what we want to think about is, what am I going to multiply to get 12? Okay, so I know that 1 times 12 will give me 12. And I'm going to separate them because there's going to be other things in between. But I know 1 times 12 gives me 12. The next thing I know is that 2 times 6 will give me 12. So these two factors go together. 2 times 6 gives me 12. And I also know that 3 times 4 gives me 12. Okay, and you can kind of see now why we call this the rainbow method, because our factors, if we pair them up like this, we create a little bit of a rainbow. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. I'm actually going to scooch this 4 off to the side a little bit because it looks a little bit like a 34 there. There we go. All right. Now the next thing I want to do is look at 20. I know 20 can be broken down 1 times 20. So those two factors go together. I also know that 2 times 10 gives me 20. And finally, I know that 4 times 5 gives me 20. And again, I always want to pair up my numbers, okay, so I can see that I didn't forget any factors. So step number 1 is to list all our factors. Step 2 is we want to identify any common factors. Common factors are numbers that they both have. And if I look at my rainbow up here, I can see they both have a 1, so 1 would be a common factor. I can see that they both have a 2, so 2 would be another common factor. They don't both have a 3. Okay, this one has a 3, but this one doesn't. But they do both have 4s, so I can see that 4 would be a common factor. And then this has a 5, this is a 6, this is a 10, 12, 20. There's nothing else that they have in common. So once I've identified all their common factors, the very last step, what its name says, is we want to find the greatest common factor. And the greatest common factor is often called the GCF. That's equal to the greatest number, the biggest number that they both have in common. And in this case, that greatest common factor would be 4. Okay, so that's one method we can use. The other method we could use is prime factorization. Okay, we talked about prime factorization in our last lesson. And the first step in using prime factorization is that you have to factor these two numbers and find the prime factorization. So I know that 42 is 6 times 7. I know that 6 is going to be 2 times 3. So I finally have some prime numbers here. 2 is prime and 3 is prime. Oh, and 7 up here was prime that I should have circled. Now if I look over at 56 and I do my prime factorization here, I know that I have 7 times 8, and 7 is a prime number. So I'm going to break apart 8 now. And 8 is going to be 2 times 4. And 2 is a prime number. Then I'm going to break apart 4 and get 2 times 2. Alright, so now I have all my prime factors listed. Now the next step when it comes to prime factorization is to identify all the common prime factors that they have. So I'm going to do this in a way that makes it a little easier for me. I'm going to list them down here. Okay. If I look at my factors for 42, the prime factors, I have 2 times 3 times 7. And if I look at my prime factors for 56, I have 2 times 2 times 2 times 7. And so my next step here is to identify all the common prime factors. So my common prime factors, they have a common 2, okay, and they have a common 7. So the way you figure out the greatest common factor when you use prime factors is your GCF, your greatest common factor, is equal to the product of the prime factors. They both have a 2, and they both have a 7. So 2 times 7 is 14, which means my GCF is 14.